in the session that may be helpful to support your well-being and the well-being of others, because everyone's mental health matters. You can listen back to this and previous shows on Ramadan Radio's YouTube channel, alongside finding further mental health information on my Twitter feed at Atiyah Ali 3. We are not here to offer you advice in place of your clinician. However, we will share information that may encourage you to seek support. If you feel you need to discuss your health and well-being following this show, then please do contact your GP in the first instance. We're not having any live calls in the show today. However, you can send in any comments on our WhatsApp number. That's 07440 420 432. That's 07440 420 432. Our show today is focused on weight matters, and in the show today, I'm pleased to invite Cindy Lehel, Principal Counselling Psychologist. The show today will focus on weight matters. Cindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Cindy, can we first start by asking you what interested you in this area of work and what it is that you do?
The initial interest came from, I guess, through the course of younger years, managing my own weight and getting into trying to live a healthy lifestyle as possible, and maybe coming from a background family where that was quite important. And then I guess as time went on and as I went into doing my training, my psychology training, alongside that, I started to do a little bit of weight management work in a service where it was around promoting a healthier lifestyle alongside ensuring that their mental health and well-being was being looked after. Mm-hmm. And then as part of the my doctorate, I did my research in professional and patients' perspectives on weight management. And again, that was then the key to where I sort of was exceptionally interested and wanted to, I suppose, specialise and do some work in the area. Mm. And then from there on in, I now do some work with an NHS service, which is part of bariatric surgery. So I do assessments and support patients who are looking to undergo this journey.
Right. So before we move on to talking about bariatric in particular, I'm just wondering, we talk about weight often, and sometimes people think about it as not having any mental health implications or any thought behind managing our weight. What's healthy weight and what isn't? Firstly, could you answer that for us? Do you think there is such thing as a healthy weight?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to say what's a healthy weight, and I think you'll find lots of information and articles that will probably try and give you some guidance. You've got your general government BMI guidance around 18 and a half to 25 and a half, but at the same time you have to take into consideration that might not account for people who may have other health problems, and as a result of that, managing weight might be difficult, or there may be other reasons there. Some people are on certain medications, which means that without them necessarily doing much from a healthier lifestyle perspective, they will still have that extra added weight. So it can definitely make it harder to define healthy lifestyle, but I think it's about the weight being functional for you as opposed to it disabling you and feeling dysfunctional, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So you alluded there to body mass index. Where do people find that information around that?
They can look on the internet. I think if you just Google and put in body mass index, you will get the ranges that will come up for you. So yeah, as long and I think better sources are probably NHS health websites rather than maybe just any of the random ones that you may come across.
Mm-hmm. And the implication of weight on mood, are there any? Is there any links? Does it have an impact? For example, some people might say it affects their mood, relationship, etc. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think there's plenty of research out there to suggest. And I think if we think of ourselves, days where we feel maybe more stressed, or we're tired, or we have lack of sleep, in order to try and keep our energies at bay, we may then end up eating or drinking more. And then even then, we will try and go probably for something a bit more unhealthy or something with a bit of a sugar boost, because we're trying to boost our energy levels to get through the day or whatever it is we're doing. And I think that can have a huge impact. And then there are certain terms that people may have come across, like comfort eating or eating my emotions. And sometimes that can be linked to unhealthy eating. One of the sort of researches that is quite identifiable is that they say that when our brain feels anxious, low in mood, more so anxious, and we're sort of on high alert and stressed, unhealthy foods seem to calm the brain down, although it's temporary, but it seems to calm the brain down, which is why we choose unhealthy foods, unfortunately. However, that may calm the brain down for that short period of time, but then in the long run, I guess you're left with excess weight if it becomes a regular thing that you're doing.
So you can have a short-term kind of impact on your mood by eating unhealthy foods, is what you're saying there.
Absolutely.
But there are long-term impacts, right? So I'm wondering, in terms of mood and food, and this comfort eating thing that you mentioned there, what is the correlation? I mean, is it age related? Is it across the spectrum? Who's affected by this?
Absolutely, everybody. I think sometimes it's about knowing and noticing and understanding what's going on with your body, and self-awareness is key, whether it's about how we're feeling that day, whether it's about why we're feeling that way, and then what are we doing about that. So one aspect is food, but then the other aspect is physical activity, so some sort of exercise. So if you're eating unhealthy because you're low in mood, and then feel you don't have much energy because you're not feeling particularly motivated, or you just don't want to go out, so you don't do any physical activity. And by that, it could just be going for a slow walk. It doesn't mean you have to be in the gym picking up weights and doing what have you. It's the simplistic forms, or even doing certain types of housework can count as physical activity, because you're moving around and doing something as opposed to maybe doing nothing. And all these things are impacted when our mood is low, when we feel highly anxious. So I guess when our mood is low, we feel less motivated to want to do anything. But at the same time, when we're highly anxious, our energies are sort of being burnt regularly anyway, because we're so anxious, which will then resort into us feeling low in mood. So it becomes almost this vicious cycle. And then we're trying to boost our mood and our energy levels. So then we start eating and drinking more maybe sugary foods and drinks, which may help, what we think will help us to feel better, but naturally it may do for the short term. But then the other aspect is that one of the huge implications is that there will be weight gain attached to that, unfortunately.
And that comes along with illness, I suppose.
Absolutely, as you're aware. So added to that is illness. So I guess in our Asian communities, there is something about diabetes and heart problems being quite high in statistics. And unfortunately, a lot of that does come, especially with diabetes, it does come from high intake of sugar.
And then being diabetic again has an impact on mood, doesn't it? Irritability at times, depending on the level of glucose.
Yeah. So when your blood sugars are they're not stable, they're sort of very erratic, that will have an impact on your mood as well. Whereas if your blood sugars are more stable, which naturally would come from eating more healthily and regularly, that will have an impact on your mood. However, it can almost work the other way around as well. If you're feeling, say, due to a particular situation, you're feeling quite stressed, and then you turn to your unhealthy foods, and then the sort of knock-on effect will be your weight once again, because your sugar levels will start to be impacted. So absolutely. And I think alongside diabetes, there are a number of other health problems that can occur. And I think the other thing to think about is with certain types of health problems, some of the medications you may get prescribed may also impact your weight as well.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you said you worked with the patients who described weight gain and had difficulties with their weight gain. Would you say some mental health medications encourage weight gain?
Yes, absolutely. My experience and what I've come across so far, unfortunately, some of these people will go ahead and have surgery, and they might do their utmost best to manage their lifestyle as best they can, but there will be some weight there that won't be within their control because of being on certain medications, and some of them can be mental health related medications, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And it is what you can kind of look after and keep well with, right? So the medication has to be taken, but then how much exercise and lifestyle changes can you do to support yourself in feeling well generally? So before we move on to the bariatric work, what kind of lifestyle do you think will be supporting a person to keep well physically, mentally, emotionally? What kind of steps can people take to think about not comfort eating, for example, or making the right choices when eating out?
Sure. I think it's about viewing healthy lifestyle as something there for life, rather than maybe how we view some of these fad diets we do, where they're temporary, and then when people stop doing them, or because they've stopped eating certain foods, then the weight just gains immediately, and then they feel even worse than maybe what they did before they started. So in terms of eating or drinking or doing everything in moderation is key. So say if we take food and drink, for example, so this isn't about that you have to totally rule out all your unhealthy snacks and unhealthy drinks. This is about having the unhealthy aspect in moderation. So you focus more on eating healthy, drinking healthy, but occasionally incorporate those techniques into eating slower. And also thinking about having that in moderation, and same with exercise, physical activity. So whether it's doing something in the house, I guess one of the things lockdown and everything in COVID has taught us is that, we can improvise and do things, workouts or some sort of housework or something at home. It doesn't have to be that we have to run to the gym, which was probably something that was quite prominent there before.
Yeah, you raise a good point there. Lots of kind of family orientated physical activities as well.
Yeah, and I guess and the other aspect is that doing something that gives you a little bit of pleasure. So it's great to maybe, I don't know, go out walking with somebody, but sometimes it's nice to do it alone as well. It's your own me time as well, depending on what you've been doing in the day or will be doing. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of alone time as well. And that feeds into the other aspect that is important and part of our healthy lifestyle is our mental health and well-being. So what do we do to manage our stress levels on a daily basis, for example? Some people will say exercise helps, but also there are other things. I think there's a lot more since COVID. There's been a lot more apps and sort of music and guided sort of meditation exercises that you can listen to online. And a lot of them, with some of the apps, you get some for free and some you have to pay, but on YouTube and things like that, I'm sure there is lots of freebie material out there where you probably can use some of that to help you. So sometimes people feel they can't sit in one position and do some sort of meditation because either it's not for them or they haven't got the time or something to that effect. But there are lots of different types of exercises and stress management exercises that you can do, even if, say, you went out for a walk. So mindfulness is another area, which is a form of meditation that's on the increase at the moment, and a lot of people who've tried it feel it's beneficial. And there is a lot of there in terms of mindfulness music, mindfulness guided meditation exercises online. So if you googled it, there would be absolutely a lot out there that you could probably try. So I think it's almost looking at every aspect of your life and thinking of how you can sort of maintain it in a healthy aspect. There is no right or wrong. What works for me may not work for you, but it's finding that happy medium. So you're not setting yourself high goals so that if you can't then meet them, then you feel like, well, what's the point? And then you sort of resort back to eating unhealthy, drinking unhealthy, and maybe not exercising. It's finding manageable goals, and that's very important. So being realistic is very important as well. So you can have treats, and again, limiting treats. For some people, it might be about having a treat every day, but it's very small. For others, it might be a bigger treat, but they might have it once a week. So I think you have to decide what's a good enough treat for you and how often you have that. Or like you mentioned earlier, Atiyah, about going out to eat and how do they make these healthier choices. I think one of the things I've noticed recently on some of the menus is that they've started to list the calories, how many sort of foods and how many calories they are. And it, it's got its pros and cons, although it can be off-putting, but at the same time, it's exceptionally informative, and it tells us that if we regularly eat these types of foods when we go out, look at all these calories that we're gaining. Sometimes people find it difficult to attribute where the weight gain's coming from. They might be like, I'm doing everything properly, I don't know where it's coming from. But I think things like that now the government are starting to put in place as well, because they're wanting to support people, is also helpful. Just like when you go out shopping and you look at the fronts of packets and they've got what they call the traffic light system. And that's very useful as well. So the reds are the ones that are telling you that it's very high, whether that's fat, sugar, salt, etc. And your greens and your ambers are obviously the ones that are telling you that this is a little bit more healthier.
So, I mean, that's good, isn't it? Having a kind of a collaborative approach where, you've got the government, health services, you've got businesses all coming together to try and provide a healthier approach.
Absolutely. And I think there's been a lot more there in terms of support and approach since lockdown and the restrictions we've had. And because lifestyle changed for a lot of people, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. So certain things weren't open. I guess in a lot of people's lifetimes, it's never happened. It's the first time it's happened where everything came to a standstill. So let alone physically being affected, a lot of people were affected emotionally and mentally. And I guess the other thing that's important that we were sort of very limited to do was connecting with other humans, people that we were used to seeing regularly, and then the emotional impact it has upon us. And, people can feel isolated. So absolutely. So I think through the course of COVID lockdown and all the restrictions that came about, it highlighted for a lot of people how they should or could cope. And I suppose, unfortunately, some people did resort to maybe overeating, or maybe not making the right choices with food, because it's not always about overeating, with food and drink. And I guess then that slowly has an impact on our lifestyles. But since then, and since where I guess a lot of statistics are now showing that a lot of people have gained considerable weight through the course of lockdowns, the government have introduced new things in the NICE guidelines, but also generally practically in the public as well, to try and help support our community and the public to be able to look after themselves and their health as best as they can.
Yeah, and you make a valid point there in terms of the NICE guidelines, which is the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Evidence. Oh, excellent. I'll look that up and remind everyone of what that is a little bit later. But you make some clear points there around COVID and how that had an impact on families, and how people had to resort to kind of staying at home more, becoming more dormant, and it was just easier to comfort eat and find different ways to become less isolated, but at the same time pick up your mood. And food is probably one of the main things that people reached out to. Perhaps if you can't eat out, you've got to eat in, and if it's got to be restaurant food, what kind of food are you consuming? Now, I know that in the other part of the show, we're going to focus on this more so, and look at options and alternative options that people might have to resort to at times, and your work in that. But before we go on to that, and for the few minutes we have leading up to the break, I just wanted to focus a little bit on being mindful, and what that means in terms of mindful walking, mindfully doing the housework, mindfully exercising. Are you aware of anything that you can add to that?
Sure. So mindfulness is all about being in the here and now, so being present. So when we're doing certain things, even simple things like housework, so for example, washing the dishes. So rather than almost thinking, right, I need to quickly finish this so I can do X, Y, and Z, or I'm missing my program, or, all the thoughts we would have going on of either what we did in the past or what we're wanting to do in the near future, you're just focusing on being in the here and now. So we'd say it was washing the dishes, for example, you're focusing on just being present in actually doing the washing up. How many times do we do certain chores and then we almost think afterwards, did I do that? Have I done that? And it's that really, rather than being present in that moment. And also, it is very difficult not to think of what we did, I don't know, earlier on, so in the past, or what we want to do in the future. But where you can focus on the here and now, that is what is helpful. Same with mindful walking. So almost walking outside as if you're a tourist. It's the first time you've seen that walk or that place, and admiring it and looking at it, rather than need to quickly get around this. And I appreciate weather doesn't help when you're out walking, but there's something about connecting with yourselves and looking around and admiring and noticing what's around you, rather than constantly wanting to be somewhere else. So you're just wanting to be present in that moment.
And currently in the way the lifestyle and the situation as it is at the moment with social media and other areas of focus, it's sometimes very difficult for people to be present, isn't it?
Absolutely. Social platforms, and thinking of media, like you've mentioned,
video games.
Yes, absolutely. It could be a good distraction, but I guess it's like everything, isn't it? It has its pros and cons. Sometimes it is useful to almost have that so-called digital detox, as they call it, but nobody says we're asking you to sort of switch off altogether. But maybe say if you do go out for a walk for 30 minutes, put your phone away or leave your phone at home if it's possible, or something, or try not to look at it. And for that period of time, just focus on what's around you.
Thank you ever so much, Cindy, for the information you've provided so far. We'll catch up about this and after the break. Welcome back. You're listening to Atiyah on the Mental Health and Emotional Wellbeing show. And as mentioned earlier, we're joined by Dr. Cindy Pulehel, Principal Counselling Psychologist. Welcome back, Cindy.
Thank you.
So before the break, we were talking about being mindful, trying to be more present, and bringing that into our daily exercise, our daily work, chores around the house, for example, trying to be a bit more mindful and present in the task that we're doing. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd like to move on now at this part of the show to talk a bit about the work that you do in bariatric work. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Why do people end up seeing you in that service?
So a lot of people who come for bariatric surgery or want to be considered for that, they're generally referred via their GPs, or another consultant where they might need another op. For example, some people might need a knee op or operation or some other kind of operation, but then they get told they need to lose some weight first before they can have that operation done. So in order for them to lose that weight, if they've tried all other avenues, then this becomes their last resort. And if they can then have this surgery first or alongside, and then they're able to have the other operation that they wanted. So sometimes other doctors, consultants will refer them for that as well. I guess there is something about weight and how healthy you are for a surgeon to operate on you as well. So they will come through to see us that way, and then there's a number of health professionals they will see, including myself. So I will assess them for having bariatric surgery. So what are their reasons for it? Why do they feel that they would benefit from this? What else is it that they've already tried? And the biggest message I try and give them is that this is an aid. It's a tool. It's not a quick fix, and it's not the answer. So point being, even once you have the surgery, if you qualify, you still have to keep working at it after surgery, because there are plenty of people who will have the surgery and then they will almost in some shape or form struggle with weight again because they've not managed to look after themselves. And by that, I don't mean that some of them will do it for a good period of time after surgery, but this is about doing it for the long run. And that's the importance here. And it's the same with adopting a healthier lifestyle, like we was talking about earlier in the show. You know, it's not about it being time limited. It's about it being forever, for the long run. And that's the importance on that. So I will see them and do assessments with them. And then after that, if I feel I need to see them again, because the other aspect I assess is their mental health and well-being. Consistency is important. It's a life-changing event. And if for any reason I'm unsure or I feel that their mental health and well-being will be impacted by this, then I may see them more than once, just to ensure that after they have surgery, they will be able to manage. Because it's a life-changing event. So if you think about it, when actual surgery takes place, your stomach becomes a lot smaller. So if you can only have, I don't know, a few teaspoons or tablespoons initially, and you're used to having a plate of food. So it's not just your body that's got to get used to that. You've got to mentally align yourself with your body as well. So that takes time to get used to. And for some people, that can then cause problems because then they're overeating and they're making themselves ill because their body can't tolerate that. So it's exceptionally important. And the assessment part is very important. So alongside of the professionals, they will see myself for that. And then going forward, if they need further support, whether that's before surgery or after surgery, then they will be provided that as well. And usually that's if they're struggling for any reason or they haven't quite got things right this end before surgery. So that could be trying to implement the best, healthier lifestyle possible. So then I will try and support them with that so that surgery is as successful as possible, and then naturally support them afterwards as well, because we want them to be successful, because by the NHS they only really get one go at it.
Right. And I suppose there you're talking about wanting them to be successful and, having a conversation around mental health and understanding, what kind of need is required psychologically prior to and perhaps after the operation, I want to say. And I'm wondering kind of, what is it about that inner dialogue that you're looking for or that you kind of focus on?
I guess what I'm thinking about is that successful is weight loss, healthy weight loss. And then once they've attained their goal, then is sustainability. And there's so much research out there to suggest, I guess, even if we think of ourselves, when we've got a goal to get to, we'll focus on it. But then when it's a case of, right, you're there now, and you've got to sustain this, at times it will feel easy to fall off the wagon so to speak. And then when those times occur, how are they best managed? Because it's very easy then to slip into old ways of eating, drinking, not doing exercise or whatever it is, and slowly coming back to where maybe you were in the first place. So sometimes I've seen people post-surgery where they've done it for so many years and it was great, but now all of a sudden the weight's creeping back up and they're not sure why. But when you talk to them further, they do know why. It's because they've become comfortable with eating certain things or portion sizes. So portion sizes is the other aspect. One part is the types of foods you choose and drinks you choose, and the other thing is portion sizes. So how much of that you're eating and how much of that do you really need? And one of the things that I suggest with that, so thinking about mindfulness that we were talking about earlier, is that we can do mindfulness eating. And that is just being mindful of what we are eating. So tasting it, smelling it, tasting it, and just enjoying it for what it is and trying not to be too distracted. So watching TV, I don't know, looking at something on your phone or, something to that effect. And what a lot of people will find is that they may actually feel they need to eat less than what's on their plate. But then some people feel that, well, actually, I was brought up that if whatever's on my plate, I must finish. And then the dietitian in the team, that's where she will suggest, well, maybe smaller plate sizes. So then you put less on the plate and then hopefully that might be enough. So sometimes it's about the psychological aspect of how we manage food and drink intake as well.
And that's interesting, isn't it? That side of kind of comfort eating, social eating, learned eating. And also there'll be a religious impact as well. You know, don't waste your food, eat what's on your plate. So a lot of people are brought up, taught whilst eating as a normal part of their dinner table manners. So, how do you find your way around that?
I guess it's instilling that this is now about health and life going forward. So quality of life. And so if they're able to be healthier, and if that means eating less or portion sizes are smaller, that will then mean quality of life will be better in theory because they're not gaining as much weight, which then means they're able to do more. So sometimes, a lot of people who I will see for assessment, when I ask them reasons for why they want surgery, a lot of it will be around quality of life. Thinking about, if I, as I lose a bit of weight, I notice that I have less aches and pains. I notice that I'm less out of breath. I notice that I can walk around a little bit more, and I want to be able to do that with my children, my grandchildren, and that sort of thing. So it becomes their values. So it then comes back to your focus and what's important for you. So then it becomes exceptionally important to then be aware of why you're doing this. And that is what will, in theory, keep people going and help with sustainability. But coming back to instilled old values, i.e. eat what's on your plate. So I guess the way to get around that, as I mentioned earlier, was smaller plate sizes. So if it's about finishing what's on your plate, you have a smaller plate. Yes, you have the option to have more afterwards, but hopefully that might be enough. But there's something about eating slower. So just thinking of when we go out to eat, if you think about it, there's research that suggests that the brain and your stomach, your gut, takes about 20 minutes to signal and talk to each other. And when we go out to eat, if you notice, as soon as we finish our main meal, how quick they are to come round with the dessert menu. And if within those 20-minute window, you order dessert, the likelihood is you will have it and it will be nice, but then you'll find that you will be in that phase of a very overly full feeling, almost to the point of where you feel a bit like, oh, I can't breathe, I've eaten too much. However, if you're able to hold out for the best part of those 20 minutes after your main meal, what you will then notice is it might go from, yes, I definitely want a dessert, to actually I'll just have maybe a hot drink or something, I don't know, or something, a cold drink, or actually, I think I'm okay and that's enough for now, and feeling a bit of contentment there. So, there is a bit of psychology behind that. And obviously, everyone has their reasons for what they do. But from our body's perspective, there is something about, I guess, experiencing what we eat as well.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about some of the comments that people might make, around the age-old ways of eating, that oil in that curry that's needed for taste and perfection, that salt that's needed, for example, and how we now kind of change that cycle and that way of eating. It might take generations, or could it be easier than that, Cindy?
I think, yes, a combination of both. I think where if parents or grandparents have a lot to do with children, so who have access to other generations, younger generations, who are more mindful of what they eat and drink, that will make a difference. I guess one aspect is when people develop certain health problems, and unfortunately, sometimes it takes them that to realise they need to make changes rather than do that beforehand. So simple strategies like table salt, I think, can go a long way if we don't use that for, people who may struggle with blood pressure or cholesterol or something to that effect, or even other health problems. Now, that is something small that could be adjusted, but if you've always had that, then it can be difficult. But it's also the culture, isn't it? So if, say, as a family, you all decided, right, we're not going to have salt on the table, we're not going to utilise table salt, whatever's in the food is in the food, that's one healthy step taken. Baby step, but one healthy step taken. And then thinking of, yes, the types of foods that are used, like you said, oil, ghee, butter, what have you. And again, it is looking for healthier options. And I think maybe this comes back to values, a bit like what I mentioned earlier around want to be healthier, want to have a good quality of life, whether that's health for yourself or whether that's wanting to live longer for the sake of, I don't know, children, grandchildren, or other interests that you may have. But usually these sorts of values are the ones that help us to focus and keep going, to look after ourselves.
And that's interesting, isn't it? If you're looking at it from a value perspective and let's say religiosity point of view, it is that, our bodies are loaned to us, and we are the caretakers of our body, and for that reason need to be thinking about diet, exercise, impact on mood, impact on others, impact on health, impact on cost for healthcare, for example, and for others. I like the value-based work, and I think that would probably work better with our communities. What do you think, Cindy?
I absolutely do, because I think the other thing to bear in mind is that, and even if we've put weight aside or general health problems, when we try everything we can and then it's not going according to plan, so whether that's weight loss or whether that's, I don't know, managing blood sugars or what have you, other people are more empathic towards us, and these could be the very people who will help us look after us. So that could be family, or it could be health professionals. However, when we're not empathic to our own needs and we don't look after ourselves well, and others around you almost get tired of saying, don't have this, or something to that effect, then it makes it a lot harder when people develop certain health problems or struggling in life in certain ways, for those loved ones around them to support them. So they want to do that, but it's harder for them because I guess there's an element of, well, actually, they've tried to reinforce values and tell them you need to do it for you and the children, the grandchildren, etc. And they've chosen not to at that point. And then afterwards, they need that help and support. And like you said, then there's financial implications as well in terms of care and medication and everything else, alongside wanting support from family and friends and health professionals.
Mm-hmm. And it is that support and time that's probably needed in the long term if it's not addressed at an earlier stage. And it sounds to me as though you speak to individuals when they have reached that stage where they really, desperately require support.
Yes, absolutely. So these people who come to bariatric surgery, a lot of them will say, this is my last resort, and this is my lifeline. I had somebody who kind of said that, this is my lifeline, and if this isn't agreed, I don't know how I'm going to continue living, because quality of life is significantly affected, and I think more so when, say, either you live on your own or you haven't got much support around you, then there is something about you have to do it for you, because there is nobody else who can do that for you. It's hard enough as it is when there are people available, but when there isn't, there's even a bigger focus to want to look after you. So I guess the terms being kind to yourself, self-compassion, they're extremely important. And part of that, the self-compassion and being kind to ourselves, is eating better, is drinking better, is, so by drinking better, I'm kind of talking about having up to 2 litres of water a day. That is classed as significant. And I think a lot of people feel that at times, if they drank a bit of water, they may not eat as much, because you think about it, you're filling the stomach up, aren't you? So it may be temporary, but some people will say to me, well, actually, when I feel hungry and I'm not sure if I'm hungry or not, I'll have a small glass of water. And then if after that I'm still hungry, I will eat. And if I'm not, or it lasts me a little bit longer, then it just means I will eat less throughout the course of the day. So it's sometimes it's these small things that can really help us go a long way. But the importance is that, if we are kind to ourselves and we look after ourselves on every level, we will feel we did everything we could. If going forward we can't control something within our health and well-being, but others around us will be more empathic towards our needs as well, because they saw you trying. They saw that you tried everything, but for whatever reason, it didn't materialize. And then that sometimes, within families and extended families, there can become a bit of a blame culture. And that's where it is important to then sort of be responsible for yourself, like you were saying, from a religious perspective of your body's a loan to you and you're the caretaker. There is something about looking after your body.
Mm-hmm. And, during Ramadan, we hear lots of talk around, how do we get that 2 litres of water in our body during, the evening time and perhaps early morning, and through the night and perhaps early morning. I suppose I'm thinking now about, we're coming to the end of Ramadan, for lots of listeners. Perhaps they're coming towards the end of Ramadan, and we're heading towards Eid. And again, Eid will be lots of food, lots of food that is probably unhealthy. How do we have those cheat days or those treat days, and where does it stop?
Absolutely. So I guess this is a little bit like thinking of maybe how you do that. So maybe if you're celebrating over a number of days, it might be thinking about within that day, if you've got an idea of the types of foods that you could generally eat, what would be the healthier options, that you could have, and what could be your treat. So you could choose that, whether it's something sweet, whether it's something savory, whether it's something carby. I think, those are those decisions that you have to make, but also the frequency of it as well, in terms of, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but sometimes when I think of certain days of celebrations and occasions, I might start off by having a good healthy breakfast, knowing that the rest of the day may not be as healthy, but within those choices I have, I will try my best to eat the healthier options, or maybe smaller portion sizes. So it might be that actually I've missed all this food and I want to have a bit of everything to try it. So then you're limiting yourself by portion sizes, which could be another way of doing it. But I guess the other thing to think about is that if you haven't had certain foods for a while, or you haven't had that consistency for a while, your body may not take to it very kindly either, because all of a sudden routine changes. And, no matter what, our bodies like consistency and routine.
Sure. And we were talking a little bit earlier about kind of those generational changes and those changes that we want to try and encourage and introduce, and how actually society at large is thinking about those positive kind of choices around health. I'm wondering about kind of, where this can become a bit difficult, and having those conversations, let's say with your children, young children, teenagers, sometimes that can kind of dip into eating disorders. So how can we, what's the fine line, and how can we have those conversations, do you think?
I think those conversations, I guess, are all around meeting everybody's needs. And by meeting those needs, it's also around looking at their diet, their lifestyle, and everything being in moderation. Because ultimately, this isn't about being on a diet where we're cutting out certain things. Maybe this is more about portion sizes or the consistency, or thinking of treats and cheat days. The frequency is, I don't know if it's a cheat day once a week or if it's a treat, depending on what the family agree or the conversations had. But if somebody's lifestyle is very different, and say they're having lots of sweets in a day or something like that, there's something about reducing that slowly rather than almost withdrawing them for that. Because I guess, especially with children and teenagers, if you try and take that away from them, then that's what they will want. So it's almost still giving them some of that. And again, it's like we said earlier, about having everything in moderation. It's about having a balanced lifestyle. That's the key message.
Yeah, key message, balanced lifestyle, looking at, a healthier lifestyle choices, and perhaps modelling and demonstrating that for families.
Yes, absolutely. Moderation, consistency, being realistic with choices. And yes, just having a balanced lifestyle in every aspect of your life, including looking after your health and well-being, which includes your weight.
Thank you, Dr. Sindip Lehel. It's been very interesting and informative, and I'm sure lots of our listeners will take notes with the information you have shared. Before you leave, could you share where can people seek support from? Where can they seek support if they've got struggling with their weight and they've tried everything, like you said earlier? Is it the GP?
Yes. Yes, GP is your first port of call. I mean, I guess there are lots of things you can have a look at online as well. Some of them, dependent on how IT tech you are, there will be online courses and programs and information that you can find. But if you're seeking significant help, then it's definitely going and speaking with your GP.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Lehel, and I'm sure we'll have you back at Ramadan Radio. Thank you very much to our listeners for listening in repeatedly on a weekly basis. Please do listen back to these this information, these sessions on our YouTube channel on RamadanRadioWolves.com. Have a lovely and